Hi guys, it's Jess and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if it is your first time here. Today I'm going to be sharing with you my October wrap up, so let's just jump straight in. The first book that I'm going to talk about is The Host by Stephanie Meyer, and I did mention this briefly in my September wrap up video, which I will stick in the description box down below if you're interested to watch it. But basically I have got a whole host of conflicting emotions about this book, so I've managed to summarize it in 4 separate sentences. So firstly, was this book good? No. Did I enjoy it? Yes. Was I hooked by the plotline and the characters? No. Did I still cry at the end? Yes. So as you can see, this book has a whole range of conflicting emotions for me. When I was reading the book, I was involved in the story and I, for the most part, was enjoying it. But when I put the book down and walked away, there was nothing drawing me back to pick it up and see how the book finished, and yet I still found myself sobbing at the end. So I have this whole array of thoughts and feelings about the book that are just at complete odds with each other. I don't know whether it was ruined a little bit by the fact that I had really enjoyed Twilight. So I went into this book with quite high expectations of what it would be like, and lots of people had said that this book was miles better than Twilight. And I think going into Twilight I had managed my expectations. I wasn't expecting a literary masterpiece and I had raised my expectations for this book, so perhaps that was my downfall. Now if you haven't come across The Host, then basically it's about an alien life force who are going across the universes, inhabiting planets, and they do that by attaching themselves to the native creatures of that planet. So in our instance that's humans, and they make an insertion in the back of a human, and this soul, this alien life force, goes in and takes over. And our whole story is based around the fact that a soul goes into a human body, but the actual person within that body doesn't disappear, and out of that unfolds a whole series of events and storyline. And there's not much more that I can say that I haven't already said in terms of how I felt about the book. It was okay, the writing was okay, it was readable, it was accessible, but there was just not the same level of feeling for me as there was when I was reading Twilight. I didn't find myself on the end of my seat, I didn't find myself wondering what was going to happen next. It was just an okay storyline, and yet there was obviously something that was hooking me in, because I sobbed at the end of this book. I literally had tears streaming down my face, and I really don't cry that easily, so work that one out for yourself. But that was the first book that I finished in October. Next up we have Mad Girl, A Happy Life with a Mixed Up Mind by Bryony Gordon. This is a non-fiction book, and Bryony Gordon is a British journalist, and this is basically her story as she lifts the lid on her personal struggles with mental health issues such as OCD, anxiety, and then alopecia, which has been caused by her stress levels and her OCD and that kind of thing. And I was really excited to read this. As a person who has struggled with some of the mental health issues raised in this book, I was really looking forward to reading an honest and frank account of somebody else's journey and how they have come to have a happy life whilst dealing with these issues of mental health. I think that any book which encourages discussion and open and frank discussion about mental health is only a positive thing, and for the most part I did really enjoy this book. And the only thing that let it down for me, and I even hesitate to say this because I really feel like it isn't what Bryony Gordon intended when she wrote the book, but there were large parts of the book which read very much like there were tales of her exploits and kind of, look at me, look how daring I was, look how cavalier I was with my life, and those sections took up a much larger portion of the book than actually discussing Bryony Gordon's mental health. Now Bryony Gordon is not a mental health expert, she is a real woman who has just gone through a real journey and is just telling you in her own words her own personal journey, and so you can't expect to have a clinical discussion about mental health. But I just found it a little bit off-putting that that took up a greater portion of the book than perhaps some of the other things that I had hoped for her to explore. Having said that, I really applaud Bryony Gordon for lifting the lid on her personal journey, for jumping in and talking about the nitty-gritty of life with mental health. You know, she covers some really dark moments in this book, and as I said, anything which encourages discussion about topics of mental health is gonna be a winner in my book. Then I read A Fatal Grace by Louise Penny. This is the second book in Louise Penny's Armand Gamache murder mystery series, and interesting fact, I mentioned maybe a couple of videos ago that I was really struggling to find this book, and so I ended up picking it up when I was in Chicago. That is because it's not called A Fatal Grace in the UK, it's called Dead Cold, and I had no clue, but the books have recently been rebranded on Amazon and they now say in brackets which number they are, and so as I was going through to order the third one, I suddenly twigged that the reason I have not been able to find A Fatal Grace is because it's not called that in the UK, it's called Dead Cold. So Dead Cold and A Fatal Grace are, for all intents and purposes, the same book. It just depends which side of the pond you happen to live on. So this is the second book in a cozy murder mystery series. It focuses on Inspector Armand Gamache, who is a detective with the Montreal police, and once again he has to go back to the sleepy village of Three Pines because another murder has taken place, and once again there are multiple suspects who could have or did have issues with the victim. I had quite early on in this book guessed who was responsible, and so I was kind of plodding along. I mean, I was still enjoying the story, but I was kind of plodding along thinking I know what the outcome of this is going to be. But one of the things which is really good about this series is that although the main focus of the book is the mystery or the murder that takes place, there are often other storylines relating to the characters bubbling away underneath the surface, and at the very end of this book, one of those storylines relating to Inspector Armand Gamache, Louise Penny just kind of dropped this bomb on us, and it was just like, what? So I went immediately and ordered the third one, which should hopefully be coming this week, because I just have to know what is going to happen. So again, I loved the writing. I thought it was so easy to read. It was perfect for the kind of autumnal, wet, grey, drizzly weather that we've been having. It was brilliant to just curl up and lose myself in it. They're really short books and the writing is so easy that you just fly through them. So regardless of the fact that I had guessed who was responsible for the crime, I still really enjoyed the book, and for me the ending was an absolute winner. So yeah, another one that I definitely enjoyed this month. And then on to audiobooks. I am still currently listening to Anne of Green Gables on audiobooks. I'm about halfway through that now, but progress with that has been a little bit slower than I perhaps would have liked. But we had a recent road trip up to the Highlands of Scotland, which is about a 7-hour journey from where we live, and so we listened to The Magician's Nephew from the Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis, and it was the kids' first time listening to The Magician's Nephew or reading The Magician's Nephew. We have read The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe with them, and they've watched the movie of that, but they've never come across The Magician's Nephew, so it was absolutely wonderful. And we listened to a BBC adaptation which is very old, and as soon as you start listening to it you realise the age of it. But when I was growing up, and I know for James as well, when he was growing up, we had VHS tapes with a BBC adaptation of the Chronicles of Narnia on them, and my favourite is obviously The Lion and the Witch and the Wardrobe, but this is a very similar style but in terms of audiobook, and it was just so whimsical to listen to it and to almost be whisked down memory lane back to our own childhoods, and the kids just really loved it, and we listened to it. It only took a couple of hours to get through the first book, and now we are halfway through The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. So I would highly recommend going onto Audible and having a look at that particular version of the Chronicles of Narnia, because we have just adored listening to them. They're done so well. They're dramatizations, I think, rather than classic narrations, but they're just so good, and they were perfect for listening to with the kids. And then quickly just onto what I'm currently reading. I am reading Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. I am just under halfway through. This is a soft sci-fi book about quantum physics, and the basic premise is that you have a scientist who is making his way home from a bar one evening back to his wife and his son when he is kidnapped and drugged. The reason that I picked this up is because lots of people had said the science was very accessible, and then it is a soft science fiction book in terms of that you don't need to be massively familiar with the scientific world and scientific terminology in order to read it. And I have to say that I am enjoying the storyline immensely, but there have been entire paragraphs that I have read that literally have made no sense to me whatsoever. And James read this and he was like, oh yeah, it's really obvious what's happening. I totally get on board with all the science and blah 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 blah. And I'm just like, what? So I don't know how accessible I would say that it is, but I'm not a scientifically minded person. That is just something that I really struggle with, so perhaps it's just me. Perhaps I'm showing my own lack of intellect there. Maybe that doesn't reflect very well on me, but I am enjoying the storyline immensely. It's the perfect type of book for reading at this time of year because it's a little bit dark. It kind of makes you want to wrap yourself in a blanket and just get lost in the storyline, and so hopefully I will have that finished very, very soon. And then once I finish that, I will be picking up The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. I am planning on doing an update video, but just very quickly, at the start of 2017 I sat down and made a video of 12 books that I wanted to read this year from various different genres, and I've recently been reflecting on that and realised that I haven't made as much progress as I should have. So Dark Matter was one of the books that I said I wanted to read, and The Handmaid's Tale is one book that I said I wanted to read, and it's super short, so this is the book that I am planning on picking up next. So there you go, they are the books that I read during the month of October. Thank you for watching. As always, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel for more content, and I will see you all soon.